Around here, they called her the cook, the help, sometimes even invisible. No one noticed her unless they needed something or wanted someone to humiliate in front of a crowd. The kitchen door swung open. Bright light flooded in, making her squint. Taking a deep breath, she lifted a silver tray of sparkling wine glasses and stepped into the grand hall. The hall resembled the miniature palace ceilings that stretched dozens of feet high crystal chandeliers, scattering 1,000 beams of light, massive oil paintings lining the walls, and marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Guests floated past in brilliant evening gowns and sleek tuxedos, diamond necklaces catching the light at every turn. In that setting, her presence felt like a stain. A few guests glanced her way, curling their lips in disdain. They didn't need to say a word. One raised eyebrow was enough to make her feel out of place. She bit her lip and steadied the tray. Her steps were slow, careful. The night sky was clear like a sheet of black velvet dotted with twinkling stars. In the heart of the city, a grand mansion stood like a fortress of light. From afar, dazzling crystal chandeliers cast golden glimmers through the towering glass windows, spilling soft light onto the perfectly manicured lawn. Music floated through the air, sweet classical strings painting an elegant melody. Laughter rang out crisp and carefree, mingling with the cheerful clinking of glasses. The atmosphere, luxurious, powerful, proud, made anyone standing outside the tall black gates feel small and out of place. Meanwhile, behind the kitchen door, a completely different world existed. The woman Petat, around 40, her hair neatly tied back, bent over, swiftly balancing heavy trays of food. Sweat trickled down her temples, soaking into the collar of her faded apron. There was no smile on her lips, only a quiet endurance that bordered on heartbreak. She was a single mother. But then just one sudden turn from a nearby guest. Crash. The sharp sound of glass echoed through the room. A wine glass had slipped from the tray, shattering on the marble. Red wine splashed across her apron and wrist. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then laughter erupted. First a single chuckle, then more, growing louder and sharper, laughter like hammers pounding in her ears. Oh my God, she can't even carry a tray. She actually thinks she belongs here. People like her should stick to grease and kitchens, not touch crystal. She stood frozen. Her hands trembled, glass shards still on the floor, blood welling from a small cut on her finger. A tall guest approached, lifting his shoe from the puddle of wine and grimacing. She just ruined my entire party. Absolutely disgraceful. More laughter followed. She looked up, and there at the kitchen door stood her young daughter, maybe 8 years old, eyes wide, staring at her mother with a mix of horror and heartbreak. That moment tore at the woman's soul. She wanted to shield her daughter, to turn away, to disappear. But her feet felt cemented to the floor. Her whole body trembled, not just from fear, but from years of pent-up pain and humiliation. Laughter roared again, whispers of contempt, judging eyes all around. She gripped the silver tray tighter. Her shoulders shook, her back hunched, yet her gaze began to rise. A glimmer lit up in her eyes, not tears but long-buried pride. No one in that room noticed. No one cared. But a secret was about to come to light, a truth that would leave the entire room stunned. The narrator's voice cut through the arrogance like a blade. The woman they just mocked is the real owner of this mansion. To outsiders, the mansion looked like a palace carved from light. Its ivory white walls were trimmed with glimmering gold. Towering marble columns stood like regal sentinels. Outside the gates, a line of luxury cars gleamed beneath golden lights. Inside, every inch was a symphony of opulence, where even the smallest details screamed extravagance. In the grand foyer, a red carpet stretched from the entrance to a sweeping staircase that curved like a ribbon. Tall candles flickered in antique bronze holders, casting a warm yet commanding glow. Massive oil paintings adorned the walls, depicting lavish banquets of European aristocracy. The atmosphere wasn't just wealthy, it was showy, a declaration that this place was not for the ordinary. At the center of the vast room, guests moved with the confidence of those who knew they belonged. A silver-haired man in a tailored suit, Swiss watch gleaming, spoke loudly of multi-million-dollar deals. A woman in a shimmering silver gown, backless and bold diamonds the size of grapes around her neck, stood tall like a queen. Laughter, handshakes, and clinking glasses filled the air like a perfectly rehearsed play where every actor played the part of power and success. And in the middle of this spectacle, the single mother Elena was merely a shadow. Elena didn't walk on the red carpet. She kept close to the wall, silent, carrying heavy silver trays. Her steps echoed faintly on the marble floor, lost beneath the swell of music and laughter. She didn't belong here, or so every guest believed. Her faded apron was stained with flour and grease, hair pulled into a bun with a few loose strands. A bony face, lines etched deep at the corners of her eyes, traces of sleepless nights. People saw a plain woman working to survive. No one noticed the pride and resilience hidden in her eyes. To them, Elena was just the hired cook, nothing more. But if anyone had cared to listen, they would have heard the quiet stories, how she raised her daughter alone after a cruel husband walked out, how she worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to afford medicine when her child was sick, how she once knelt at a hospital's doorstep begging for just a few more days to pay the bill. All of it, every hardship, Elena kept to herself. Just as silently, she now stood here serving food to those who looked down on her. Her daughter, Lily, 8 years old with soft black hair and wide eyes. The little girl rarely left her mother's side. On nights when Elena worked late in the kitchen, Lily would sit in the corner with an old book silently waiting. Her eyes mirrored her mother's, deep, strong, yet shadowed by fear from watching her mom be humiliated again and again. Tonight, Lily was at the mansion too. Of course, she wasn't allowed at the table with the guests. Elena had left her in a small room behind the kitchen, telling her to be patient and wait. But curiosity and worry had drawn those little feet out just in time to see her mother mocked in front of a crowd as the wine glass shattered. In sharp contrast to Elena, the center of attention that evening was Madeline, a wealthy socialite famous for her arrogance. Dressed in a blazing red gown, a long string of pearls draping to her waist, her fingers sparkled with diamonds so large they caught every light in the room. Madeline wasn't just rich, she loved making sure everyone knew it. Her voice was shrill, her gestures sharp, her gaze always tilted downward, as if everyone else was beneath her. It was Madeline who laughed the loudest when Elena dropped the glass. She pointed lips curling into a cruel smile. How pathetic, right where she belongs on the floor, cleaning up a mess. The words cut deep like a knife into Elena's pride. But she didn't reply. She simply bent down quietly, picking up the broken glass, letting the wine soak into her apron and her skin. Around her, a few guests shook their heads, not in sympathy, but as if watching a mildly amusing sideshow. At parties like this, someone being humiliated was almost expected, a bit of spice to the evening. The music played on. The orchestra never missed a beat. But inside Elena, everything had gone still. She could smell the sharp scent of wine clinging to her, mixed with the iron tang of blood from a tiny cut on her hand. Her breath was heavy. The mocking laughter rang in her ears, pounding with each beat of her heart. And from the kitchen doorway, Lily's innocent, trembling eyes stared at her mother, reflecting every ounce of the shame. Elena wanted to gather her child in her arms to whisper that everything would be okay. But she couldn't. Not yet. Because tonight, every eye in the room was on her. This grand hall held 2 worlds. On one side, people wrapped in silk and jewels, seated high above, convinced that wealth defines worth. On the other side, Elena, a woman in the shadows, wearing a faded apron, calloused hands carrying the weight of a lifetime, and the fragile hopes of a little girl. The contrast was so stark, it thickened the air more than any insult could. Yet deep down, something waited. A truth no one knew, a secret that could turn everything upside down. And tonight, that secret would no longer stay hidden. Elena knelt down, the white cloth in her hand soaked up the red wine, staining her fingertips a deep brown. Madeline's polished heel stopped right at the edge of the spill, the toe of her shoe gleaming like a mirror. "Clean it thoroughly," she said, lips curled. "We don't tolerate stains here." Elena lowered her head. She wiped slowly, carefully. Glass shards crunched beneath the cloth. Blood beaded on her finger. "Smile, would you?" a male guest prompted, voice gravelly. "Aren't you living the dream, doing the job you love most?" Elena looked up. She didn't smile. The lights were blinding. Her throat tightened. She glanced toward the kitchen. Lily was still standing there, clutching her stuffed bear tight, her wide eyes filled with fear. Elena gripped the cloth until her knuckles turned white. "Apologies for the accident," she said calmly. "It wasn't just an accident," Madeline corrected. "It was carelessness from someone who doesn't belong here." Nearby, Victor the maitre d' stood with arms crossed, his tuxedo pressed to perfection, bow tie flawless. "Miss Elena," he said, "just loud enough, don't ruin the evening. Clean up quickly, then step back." Elena nodded. She stepped away back into the shadows. The kitchen door closed behind her, shutting out the laughter, but not the pounding in her chest. The kitchen air was hot, heavy with melted butter. Pans sizzled, steam clouded the room. Marco, the large, deep-eyed head chef, looked up at her. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Elena dropped the cloth into the sink, rinsed her hand quickly, then rubbed salt into the cut. It stung. She took a deep breath. "Table 6 needs another Wellington." Marco nodded, then said quietly, "Everyone makes mistakes. I don't want to make them anymore." Marco looked at her a second longer, as if he wanted to say more. But the door swung open again. Victor stuck his head in. "Madeline wants a new amuse-bouche. Nothing she's tasted before in this city." 5 minutes. A new amuse-bouche in 5 minutes. Marco's eyes widened. Victor shrugged. "She's paying." His eyes scanned the room, landing on Elena's now dried blood. "You can do it," Elena froze. "Me, you," Victor emphasized. "The head chef's busy, and Madeline wants your flavor of hardship." Her words. Elena turned away, opened the fridge. Dim light spilled out. She stared at the scattered ingredients: wild mushrooms, goat cheese, thin filo dough, a few beets, green apples, a worn bottle of balsamic vinegar. Her hands moved before her brain caught up. Chopping mushrooms, sauteing them with butter and garlic, whipping goat cheese with lemon zest, brushing filo with butter and folding it neatly. Dicing apples, mixing them with vinegar, slicing beets paper thin and soaking them in sugar and salt water. Sizzles from the pan, knife tapping against the board, heart pounding. Lily appeared quietly at the kitchen door. Elena saw her and gave the slightest shake of her head. "Stay there, sweetheart." She plated a single silver spoon, sauteed mushrooms on the bottom, a dollop of goat cheese, a delicate beet, petal on top, a sprinkle of crisp tart apple, and a drop of thick ink-dark balsamic glaze. 30 spoons, Victor said. "Now." Elena worked. Her hands moved fast, as if survival itself depended on it. Each spoon was a breath. The kitchen door flew open. The silver tray was carried out. The door closed. The kitchen fell silent for 2 seconds. Then scattered applause echoed back. Marco exhaled in relief. "Good." Before Elena could respond, the door opened again. Victor poked his head in a crooked smirk on his lips. Madeline said, "Tolerable taste, but she wants another dish, to make sure the first wasn't just luck." 10 minutes. Lily appeared quietly at the kitchen doorway. Elena glanced at her, gave a small shake of her head. "Stay put, sweetheart." She carefully plated a small silver spoon, a layer of salted mushrooms at the bottom, a dollop of whipped goat cheese, a thin beet slice draped over the top, a touch of tart green apple, and a single drop of thick inky black balsamic reduction. 30 spoons, Victor ordered. "Now." Elena got to work, her hands moving with the urgency of survival. Each spoon was a breath, a heartbeat. The kitchen doors burst open. The silver tray was carried out. The doors closed behind it. Silence. Then faint clapping trickled in. Marco let out a breath. "Good." Before Elena could respond, the doors opened again. Victor popped in, smirking. Madeline says, acceptable flavor, but she wants another dish. To make sure the first wasn't just luck, 10 minutes. From amuse-bouche to canapés, from canapés to soup, from soup to a vegetarian dish, no dairy, no butter, no nuts, no gluten, no, as Marco muttered, nothing remotely fun. Elena worked quietly. Sweat clung to the back of her neck. The cut on her finger pulsed with every motion of the knife. Each time Victor showed up, he brought more demands, more cutting remarks, more invisible daggers stabbing at her dignity. Your plating looks provincial. Don't think the applause is for you. Here people don't praise the kitchen, they praise the one who pays. At the table, Madeline raised her glass of red wine, glancing toward the kitchen doors as if peering through a dirty mirror. Who says poverty has no flavor? She said, laughing. The guests laughed with her. Tonight, we're savoring the taste of effort. The laughter cracked through the room like breaking glass. Elena bowed her head lower, but her eyes shone brighter. Each dish she placed on the tray was a wordless answer. No grand declarations, no arguments, just quality. It was nearly 9 o'clock. The charity auction was about to begin, all items from the host's private collection, as Victor announced over the mic. Madeline stood up wearing a massive diamond bracelet that scattered light into 1,000 sparks. And here she said in her high theatrical voice to begin the bracelet breath of ice. As the jewelry tray passed near the kitchen, Victor peeked in, muttering flatly, "Don't touch." Elena didn't. She was busy retasting a brown sauce. 5 minutes later, a rising commotion echoed back, then panic. The bracelet. It's gone. That's impossible. Why was the safety latch open? Victor stormed into the kitchen like an arrow. His eyes were ice. Where's the bracelet? Elena stood upright. I don't know. You were closest to the tray, but I didn't touch it. Victor waved a hand. 2 large security guards followed him in. Search her things. Marcus stepped forward. Hey, wait a minute. Quiet Victor cut him off. Policy: when something goes missing, the kitchen gets checked first. They opened Elena's locker. A worn-out coat, a plastic lunchbox, a frayed handkerchief, a stack of children's drawings, one of a house and 2 people holding hands. Nothing one of the guards reported. Victor turned to Elena. Your bag? Elena handed it over. Inside, a faded wallet, a few coins, gauze, and an old photograph, Elena holding Lily in front of a small white house. Also clear, the guard confirmed. Victor frowned. His gaze swept over her apron. Take it off. Elena untied the apron. She could feel the weight of eyes scanning her skin, silent, invisible, but heavy as stone. Nothing, the guard repeated. No chain, no hidden latch, Victor muttered through clenched teeth. A quiet cough. Jonas, the older guard, pointed to the corner shelf. There. On the floor near the wall, a faint glimmer, a bracelet lying just beneath the shelf, barely catching the light. Everyone froze for a beat. Victor bent down, picked it up, examined it, then looked at Elena. His face betrayed no apology. Tighten security, he said into his radio, and walked out. Madeline appeared in the doorway as if drawn by the scent of drama. What a thrilling moment, she said. Good thing we found it. I thought for a second. She paused, her smile never reaching her eyes. Someone might have needed the money. She turned on her heel, her red gown whispering across the marble. Her expensive perfume left a cold trail behind her in the kitchen. Elena stood still. Her pulse throbbed in her neck. Lily wrapped her arms tightly around her from behind, whispering, I'm scared. Elena bent down, stroked her daughter's hair. I'm here. Her voice was dry like desert wind. Out in the banquet hall, the lights gleamed brighter. Madeline stood on the podium, silver microphone in hand. Tonight, she declared, voice ringing, we raise money for the less fortunate, to remind them that society always extends a hand as long as they know their place. A round of applause. Behind the kitchen door, Elena stood listening to each word like nails being hammered in. Less fortunate. Know their place. Madeline went on, I believe everyone deserves a chance. But don't expect one if you forget where you came from. Elena closed her eyes. 1 beat, 2. Then opened them again and looked at the old stone step beside the kitchen door. The third step from the bottom had a crescent-shaped dent. Years ago, in another life, she used to slide her finger into that groove. This house remembered her, even if tonight everyone pretended not to. Table 9 wants their dish replaced. Victor snapped, tossing a ticket at Elena. No lactose, no seafood, no mushrooms, no pepper, no salt, no flavor, Marco muttered. Elena didn't smile. She opened the spice cabinet, pulled out fresh lime leaves and a pinch of grated zest. She assembled a warm salad with roasted squash, olive oil, herbs, and a few pomegranate seeds, just sweet enough, just hearty enough. As she approached table 9 with the dish, an arm shot up. Clara, the future daughter-in-law of a prominent guest, snapped, "What is she doing? I haven't finished taking pictures." Her mother chuckled. Typical kitchen help. No sense of aesthetics. Elena stopped. "I'm sorry. I'll wait." Clara looked up, her voice like ice. "What's your name, Elena?" "No, I mean the name of your supervisor, Mr. Victor. Call him." Elena set the tray down. Victor arrived moments later, giving Clara a small bow, his voice suddenly velvet smooth. "Is there a problem, miss? She ruined my shot." "My sincerest apologies," Victor said, turning to Elena. "Prepare another plate in 5 minutes. This time arranged for the right angle." "The right angle," Elena echoed. "The one who pays," Victor reminded her under his breath. Elena carried the tray back. Her spine straight, her eyes lowered. The phrase "right angle" jabbed the back of her neck like a needle. In the kitchen, the sauce was thickening. Elena pulled the pot off the heat. Someone brushed the handle. "Careful," she called, but it was too late. A stream of hot sauce splashed down her wrist. Scalding, burning. Elena clenched her teeth. No sound escaped her lips. She grabbed a towel, soaked it in cold water, wrapped it tightly. Lily rushed to her face, pale. "Mom," Elena. Victor appeared at the door, eyeing the wet cloth. His brow furrowed. "Don't let your sweat drip on the food." Elena looked up, breath-catching. "I got burned." So Victor shrugged. "The guests don't eat excuses." Marco slammed a spoon onto the counter. The sharp clang cut through the air. "That's enough." Victor turned coldly. "You're paid to cook, not to perform." Elena gently touched Marco's arm, shaking her head. "It's fine." But nothing was fine. The pain pulsed in waves, alternating between raw heat and icy sting as water seeped into the burn. Every breath was another small slice. But nothing was really fine. The dull ache of the burn alternated with sharp chills every time water seeped into the wound. Every breath felt like a tiny cut. It was around 10:30. The guests had drunk more, their words looser, their cruelty smoother. Madeline signaled for the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said with a smile, "tonight I've learned something even the most. Modest individuals can still contribute to our celebration." A man squinted. "You mean the smell of grease?" "No," Madeline replied, pretending to ponder. "I mean, they remind us that everyone has their place. If everyone sits at the head of the table, who's left to serve laughter?" Applause. Dry clapping like brittle leaves. Elena stood at the edge of the doorway, holding an empty tray. She didn't look toward the stage. She looked at Lily, her daughter, now sitting on the stairway, teddy bear in her lap, cheek resting against its soft fur for warmth. Elena walked over, knelt beside her in the shadows. "Tired? I'm okay." Lily gently touched the bandage on her mother's wrist. "You're okay too." Elena offered a faint smile. "Yeah, I'm okay." Victor approached, holding a paper envelope. "Your paycheck," he said, handing it over. "But I deducted the glassware replacement fee and floor cleaning cost." Elena looked at the number. Empty. And Victor added the small room behind the kitchen. "We'll need it cleared out by the weekend. The owner wants to renovate." Elena lifted her head. "The owner, is there a problem?" Elena stayed silent. She glanced through the small kitchen window. Outside, the garden canopy swayed gently in the night breeze. The sky was dark. On the rooftop, the angel statue tilted its head, moss-covered wings catching the glow of the lights like silent tears. "No," she whispered, "no problem." Amid the noise and laughter, a silver-haired man stood at the bottom of the staircase, staying just out of the spotlight. Hale, a lawyer with thin glasses and a worn leather briefcase. He scanned the crowd as if searching for someone. His eyes landed briefly on Elena, then flicked away as though touching a secret. Elena paused. She knew that face. It belonged to the days of signatures and seals, of quiet office meetings that smelled like paper and rain. Hale nodded gently in her direction, then stepped back into the shadows. Elena turned away. The kitchen called. The main course was ready. 11:45 p.m. The dessert wasn't ready when the service lift jammed 3 trays of chocolate mousse stuck between floors. Victor's tone was cutting. "Tonight we don't cater to mistakes. Elena, take them up the stairs." 3 flights, Marco asked, alarmed. "She's young," Victor replied, not sparing Elena a glance. Elena hoisted the trays and entered the narrow stairwell. Each step felt like a shallow breath. The trays were heavy, her burn throbbed, sweat tracing rivulets down her back. Rounding a corner, someone brushed past her, sending a tray askew. She pressed herself against the wall, steadying her balance just in time. A glass of mousse slipped. She caught it, heart pounding like a drum. She inhaled 1 breath, 2, 3, then continued upward. At the ballroom entrance, Victor waited, inspecting the mousse's surface. "Good," he said coldly. "You're learning." The head table awaited. Madeline sat center stage. Guests filmed the dessert in slow motion. Victor nodded with pride, as if he'd crafted each swirl himself. Elena stood poised, awaiting instruction. Madeline lifted her spoon, tasted, paused. "Spicy," she frowned. "Who put chili in this?" Elena froze. "No one. There's a bite." Madeline insisted, locking her gaze on Elena. "That's on you," Marco interjected quietly. "There's no chili." Madeline tossed her head. "Bring out your sous chef." All eyes turned to Elena as if she were an exhibit. Elena stayed calm. "May I taste it? You may not," Victor barked. Elena picked a clean spoon just a touch from the rim of the dish and lifted it to her lips. "No spice." "A prank," Elena said quietly. "Someone spiked your spoon." The room erupted. Some laughed. Others whispered, "Brilliant." Madeline narrowed her eyes. "Are you calling me a liar?" "No," Elena said firmly. "I'm saying someone wanted to humiliate you and used me to do it." Silence fell, then a quiet chuckle from a young man. Evan, a silent observer at the party, spoke up. Sharp. "I saw the server from table 3 switch spoons before she tasted." Victor's head snapped around. Who? Evan shrugged. Short brown hair, beauty mark on her left cheek. Victor looked around. "I haven't seen her since." Madeline's lips curved into a knife-thin smile. "Either way, dessert has lost its charm." Elena bowed her head. "I'll bring something else." Victor began to step forward, but Madeline's expression flickered with a new idea. "No need," she said. "Let her sing." A singing chef. Someone snickered. Madeline raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Who spilled wine? Must sing an apology." Victor nodded silently, eager to see if she would break. Elena stepped into the ballroom light. Phone camera swung up. She locked eyes with Lily, who stood blinking behind the column, tears in her eyes. Elena drew in a steady breath and began to sing a lullaby, simple and soft, as tender as a feathered cloth, as delicate as a whisper. The orchestra slowed. The crowd hushed. Her voice wasn't an apology. It was a story of home, a wooden table with knife marks, a window overlooking a garden, a mother bringing soup in winter. Some guests lowered their phones entranced. Lily tilted her head, humming along. Madeline tensed. Her lips fell into a frown like cracked glass. "Enough," she said sharply, clapping 3 dry blows. "Get back to work. Don't turn this party into a charcoal dinner." Elena lowered her head, but something in her eyes had changed. The final note lingered stubborn, unresolved. She turned toward the kitchen only to find the door locked. She tried the handle, no movement. Peals of giggling from the back. "Oops, wrong lock," someone joked. Victor appeared behind her. "Any trouble? The door's locked." "Then knock," he replied and passed without helping. Elena tapped. Nothing. She wrapped her uninjured arm around her burned wrist, shaking from cold. A draft of air pulled from the ballroom. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, Marco opened the lock, irritated. Who locked this? No answer. But Elena didn't need one. Past midnight, the first of the guests left, weary smiles, glazed eyes. But whispers of the stolen bracelet, the spicy spoon, the song they spread like wildfire. Elena carried the empty trays. Her shoes slipped on the puddle before she could correct crash. The hush that followed echoed longer, sharper than before. Madeline wheeled around as though she'd orchestrated this. Again, Elena pushed herself up, kneecap aching. "What do you want here?" Madeline demanded, walking toward her. "Pity, praise," or she smiled a seat at the table. Elena let out a breath, straightened, calm. "I want to finish my work." Madeline's voice sharpened. "Your job is to make people comfortable, not make them notice you." Elena met her gaze. "I'm not asking to be seen." A ripple passed through the crowd. Victor reached for Madeline's arm. "Let me handle this," he whispered. Then to Elena, voice grave, "You're fired, now." Time froze. Lily cried out no and ran to Elena's side, clinging to her. Elena placed a hand on Lily's head, burn warmth, pressing into fear cold skin. "That's not your decision," Marco interjected. "We need her." Victor smiled, a calculating tilt. "Whose kitchen is this?" The question hung. Elena looked up, the towering staircase, eyes landing on the family portrait, a man, a dark-haired woman, and a young girl. Their smiles faded with time, the frame gold, but scratched. She inhaled slow. "If I leave," she said quietly, "who pays for the work I've done tonight?" Victor shrugged. "Your presence was reward enough." A cruel laugh cracked somewhere. Elena dropped her head as though etching a tally into her mind. She led Lily into the shadowed corner by the window. Outside, garden trees bent in the night wind. A floodlight caught the angel statue, raindrops clinging to its wings like sorrow. "We can go," Lily whispered. "Not yet," Elena replied. Why? Elena looked at her daughter. "Because some things, if you walk away, they'll never be spoken." Lily bit her lip. "I'm scared." "Then be scared," Elena said softly, drawing her close. "But I'll stay." Madeline appeared, the red gown like smoldering embers. "You're still here?" she asked. Elena didn't reply. Madeline's voice coldly smooth. "Do you know the last course of the evening?" Elena waited. "It's a speech about the value of effort. I'd like you to stand next to me, an illustration." "Illustration?" Madeline smirked, mic in hand. "Yes, to show how not everyone who tries deserves a place at the table." Elena raised her head. "And you, what do you illustrate?" Madeline's smile was a spider's silk. "Reality." "Right," Elena echoed softly but firmly. "Truth always finds a way out." Madeline tapped the mic. "Only if someone dares to speak it. Tonight the mic is mine." "Yes," Madeline said, her voice smooth. "An illustration of the fact that not everyone who tries deserves a seat at the head of the table." Elena met her gaze. "And what do you illustrate?" Madeline tilted her head, her smile as thin as thread. "Truth." "Truth," Elena echoed softly. "Truth always finds a way out. Only if someone's loud enough to speak it," Madeline replied, tapping her nail on the microphone. "And tonight, the mic is in my hand." 11:55 p.m. The staff lined up along the edges of the ballroom. Guests gathered around the stage. Victor stood beside Madeline, his stare sharp as steel. Marco remained by the kitchen, arms crossed like a sentry guarding sacred ground. Elena placed her hand on the stair railing. The wood was cool. Beneath its new coat of paint, the grain felt familiar. She pressed her bandaged hand to it, painful but grounding. From the shadows, Hale the lawyer appeared once more. He placed a hand over his heart, a gesture as gentle as a memory brushing her shoulder. A small nod. Then he stepped back into the dark, leaving a sealed envelope on the nearby table. Elena's eyes flicked to the envelope, then to Lily. "We're almost there," she said, not knowing if she was speaking to her daughter or to herself. Madeline stepped onto the stage. The mic crackled softly, her voice spreading beneath the high vaulted ceiling. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began tonight, "we've dined, we've toasted, we've shared our finest smiles and our meals were passable, laughter. But what matters most is the message in society: everyone has their place. The gifted sit at the head of the table, the lesser stay in the kitchen." Her gaze shifted, landing squarely on Elena. "Held," and sometimes, Madeline continued, "those in the kitchen think they can cross that line. They forget where they came from." The room filled with shallow breathing, scattered claps, glasses clinking, the scent of white flowers thick in the air. Elena placed her hand on the envelope. Her fingers trembled. Sweat seeped through the bandage. Lily's grip on her hand tightened. "You ready?" Elena whispered. Lily nodded. Elena stepped out from the shadows. Heads turned, time slowed. She stopped 3 paces from the stage. Not close, not far. Just enough that when she spoke, everyone would hear her. Madeline looked down, a triumphant smile tinged with wine. "You want to say something?" Elena's eyes scanned the room. The guests, Victor, Marco, Lily. She laid the envelope on the edge of the podium. Her fingers brushed the mic. A soft click like the sound of a lock turning. Elena drew a breath. Her voice calm, low, unforced. "There are things I've stayed silent about for too long." The entire room held its breath. "There are things I've stayed silent about for far too long." Elena's voice echoed, not loud but clear enough for all to hear. It rang through the microphone, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling, sweeping across the glittering chandeliers and the crimson carpet that stretched down the hall. The room froze. Glasses paused midair. Half-hearted laughter died in the throat. Elena stood there, no apron, no silver tray, just a simple black dress and bandaged hands still raw from the burn. Her eyes were calm, yet impossibly deep, holding both light and shadow. Madeline let out a high-pitched laugh, trying to break the silence. "Oh, do go on. The help has a speech now. Ladies and gentlemen, looks like this will be tonight's final course." A few scattered chuckles followed, but they fell flat. Elena's calm composure drew every gaze back to her. She placed an envelope on the podium, her finger lightly tracing the sealed edge for all to see. "This," she said slowly, "is the truth I've kept for 10 years. Victor stepped forward, fast reaching to snatch the envelope, but an older hand stopped him. Hale, the attorney, emerged from the shadows with quiet command. He placed a firm hand on Victor's shoulder and shook his head gently. "Don't," he said. "You know exactly what this is, and you know I don't play games." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. The name Hale traveled between guests. He was infamous in legal circles for taking only ironclad cases. Elena opened the envelope carefully, deliberately, as if every second were etching itself into the memory of those watching. Inside, a property deed. The red legal seal still bold, the name on it clear as daylight. Elena Rosewood. Gasps filled the air. A sharp inhale. A glass hit the table. All eyes turned to Madeline. Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly with a plastic smile. Forgery? A cheap act. Don't believe her. Hale's voice cut in low and undeniable. It's authentic. I oversaw the transaction. It's registered in the court's record. Legally, the sole owner of this estate is Miss Elena Rosewood. Silence. Dance complete. Elena took a breath and met Madeline's eyes. You said I don't belong here, but it's you who's out of place. Guests began whispering. Some stood confused as if realizing they'd been deceived all evening. Victor tried to interrupt. That's enough. She's manipulating some loophole. I've managed this estate for years. Elena hired me. Hale interjected firmly. And you? Victor were only a temporary manager. You exploited her absence to turn this home into a stage for fraud. Victor stood frozen, but his eyes, dangerous, flashed with something unspoken. Madeline slapped the mic, scrambling for control. Even if this is her house, so what? Money doesn't change the truth. She's just a single mother, a kitchen worker. Who here would ever accept that as a rightful owner? Her words sliced like blades, but no applause followed. Instead, a well-dressed older gentleman leaning on a cane stood and spoke. Madeline, that's enough. We mocked someone in her own home. I feel ashamed. The whispers turned to murmurs of agreement. A few nodded. Others averted their eyes from Elena. She stepped forward. Her voice cracked but stayed steady. 10 years ago, I left this house. My husband had just passed, leaving me and our daughter with an inheritance I didn't know how to protect. I chose to live simply to work in kitchens so that my child would grow up knowing that true worth doesn't lie in marble floors or diamonds, but in resilience and compassion. She looked to Lily, who was now crying proudly. But tonight, Elena continued, I can't stay silent anymore. Not to protect myself, but to protect my daughter from the humiliation you've poured onto her. She doesn't deserve to watch her mother treated like garbage in her own home. The room was still. Madeline let out a shrill laugh, covering the tremble in her voice. What a tragic little story. But who's to say it's not just a stunt for sympathy? Hale stepped forward again, opening another file. In here are full records. Her late husband's will tax payments made consistently over 10 years, all in Eleanor Rosewood's name. If you'd like, Madeline, we can be in court by morning. The room buzzed again, sharp, unignorable. Madeline's face tightened, but she wasn't done. Even so, this house stayed alive because of me. I held events brought in elite society, she just cooks. What kind of owner hides in the shadows? Elena turned to the guests. Maybe I stayed silent too long, but I'm not here to reclaim some glory. I only want to ask one question. What defines true worth? Is it the diamonds on your fingers or the hands that worked every day to feed a child? The words sliced the air. Even the most polished faces looked inward. Suddenly, Lily stepped forward into the center of the hall. Her voice trembled but carried. Stop laughing at my mom. She's done everything so I could go to school, wear warm clothes, survive when I was sick. If she doesn't deserve to be the owner, then who does? The hall held its breath. Some women wiped away tears. Elena reached to pull Lily close, but realized this moment belonged to her daughter, to be heard, to be seen. Madeline pressed for control again. Don't fall for this. She wants the house back to what turned it into a diner. We need people who uphold class. Then a young male voice rose from the front, Evan, the quiet guest who'd been watching it all. Class doesn't mean stepping on others. If this is your definition, I'd rather eat in the kitchen. Applause erupted, at first hesitant, then rising, spreading. Madeline stiffened, her composure cracking like a porcelain mask. Hale wasn't finished. He raised another folder. One more matter. During Elena's absence, Victor signed illegal rental agreements, profiting by turning this estate into an events venue. I have copies of those contracts and the wire transfers into his personal account. Gasps filled the room. Guests turned to Victor, many of whom had paid tens of thousands to attend such events. Victor paled. It was to maintain the estate. Without me? No, Elena said coldly. Without me, you'd have had nothing to maintain. She looked up at the vaulted ceiling, then to the old family portrait, her husband and their young daughter. The smile faded by time the gold frame chipped. This house has seen everything, she said, voice amplified through the mic. The parties, the laughter, and the nights I sat alone in that kitchen grieving. I left to find myself. But that ends now. I return to remind you the true owner was always here. The chandelier sparkled like a quiet affirmation. The atmosphere shifted. Guests rose one by one. Some bowed. Some reached to shake Elena's hand. Those who once mocked her now avoided her gaze. Madeline tried shouting again. She's fooling you. This is a play, but applause drowned her out. Footsteps approached, Elena recognition in every tap of leather on marble. Victor backed away, sweat beading. His eyes hinted at something darker, but he'd lost control. Elena held Lily close. Their eyes glistened, wet with tears, fierce with pride. Tonight, Elena declared, her voice steady, I don't need your honor. I only need the truth to be seen. And now it is. Applause thundered. Some wept. But in the shadows, Victor clenched his fists. Madeline's forced smile finally cracked, gone. They hadn't lost. Not yet. And in that moment, the story pushed toward its final reckoning when those who ruled by fear would face the weight of justice. The applause still echoed faintly like waves retreating from the shore, but beneath the glow of crystal light a different current stirred, cold, covered, dangerous. Victor narrowed his eyes. A blade lived in that look. His right hand clenched, knuckles sharp beneath tight skin. A quick glance barely perceptible toward the east corridor where the control room and camera archives were held. A small movement, but Elena caught it. She had once survived by reading moments like that, shallow breaths, heavy steps, the flick of a brow. signs the wealthy often missed, too busy watching their reflections to notice the world moving around them. "Thank you, everyone," Elena said gently, "but truth isn't complete." Until darkness agrees to turn on the lights. She set the mic down, stepped off the stage. Lily followed close. Marco slipped quietly out from the kitchen, joining her side. Jonas, the older security guard, gave a subtle nod, a silent promise. And near the edge of the light, Hale already held a ring of silver keys. The east hallway was cool, like the heart of a river at midnight. Oak-paneled walls exhaled the scent of old resin beneath fresh paint, so familiar that it caught in Elena's chest. She knew every grain, every scratch. She had once hidden candy for her daughter here, once pressed her forehead against these panels and counted the raindrops on the windows. Now, what was once a refuge had become a court. Victor had a head start 3 steps ahead before he stopped. Elena was already standing at the corridor's mouth, calm and unmoving. Marco angled behind her like a wall of flesh. Behind Victor, Jonas sealed the hallway door with a metallic clack. "I'm accessing the control room," Victor said evenly, "just to ensure safety." "A good idea," Elena replied. "Safety for data, for evidence, for the people you used as shields." Victor smiled, his eyes avoiding hers. "Need proof, do you?" The sub-story wasn't enough. "This isn't theater," Elena said, reaching out. Hale placed a slim key into her hand, etched with an R. "Backup key to the tech room," he murmured. Victor flinched. "You had a key, the owner had one." Hale corrected, "I only represent her." The steel door opened. The scent of ozone and dust met them. Sleek monitors reflected their images in doubles. Victor blinked just a bit, but it was enough for Elena to see it. This was his kingdom where he had spliced and staged everything like a director crafting a film. "Jonas," Elena said, "you're on the night shift. You know where the main server is." Jonas moved forward like an old cat. He knelt, slipped his hand between 2 racks. "Here," he said, pulling out a small black DVR LED lights flickering. "Secondary backup. Not many know it exists." Victor scoffed. "And not many know it was wiped and swapped 3 months ago." Hale pushed his glasses up. "Then what about the second backup?" He turned to Elena. She didn't answer. Instead, she knelt near the wooden baseboard below the rack where one plank had been worn into a crescent shape. She slid her finger into the groove. Click. A secret drawer opened, revealing a small SSD wrapped in oilcloth. Victor cursed under his breath, lips taut like thread. "The house remembers me," Elena whispered. "It never betrayed me." Hale inserted the drive into a dock. Screens blinked awake. Jonas typed a few quick commands. A silver snake of timestamps slithered across the screen. Fast forward, locate. 21:17, the jewelry cart rolling past the kitchen. Victor standing in the doorway, eyes fixed on the tray. A brown-haired waiter, mole on his left cheek, reaches into frame. He subtly flips the jewelry box latch. 12 seconds later, the necklace drops behind the wall. Victor doesn't flinch, but the corner of his mouth twitches. 22:34, the main hall. A spoon swapped its handle, coated with chili. A wide-angle shot shows the same waiter accepting a white envelope from table 7. "Madeline's table." "Zoom in," Elena said. Jonas zoomed. The envelope's corner revealed a thin initial M. No further proof needed. Victor whirled, reaching to destroy the dock. Marco intercepted with a smooth motion, catching the wrist, bending it at a safe but painful angle. "Kitchen teaches you a lot," Marco muttered. "Not just seasoning." Victor yanked back, retreating a step. His eyes darkened, now cold steel. "What do you want?" he growled. "A public trial, a peasant court in the middle of a gala. You'll forget who I am." "We remember," Hale replied calmly, pulling another file from his briefcase. "We remember your account numbers." The grand hall. Chandelier lights dripped like jeweled rain. Madeline still stood at the podium, lips drawn tight. She saw Elena return with Hale, with Jonas, with Marco, with Lily. Behind them, a curious wave of guests followed, curiosity rising like a tide. Elena nodded to the band. The music stopped. The mic came back on. From the wings, Evan, the young guest, had pulled down a projector screen. The projector clicked on its beam, slicing through the dust of the night. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena said, her face steady, "now this is the footage you haven't seen." The images began to play. Frame by frame, clear, no narration, no editing. Moments of silence that spoke louder than 1,000 words. A gasp came from the back row. A woman covered her mouth. A man lowered his eyes. The truth was no longer in the telling, it stood on its own, walking toward each person like a guest who needed no invitation. Madeline lunged for the mic. This footage could have been faked. Her voice cracked higher than usual. "The timestamps match the system logs," Jonas said plainly. "The backup drive isn't connected to the internet. If someone faked it, they'd have to be divine." Hale stepped forward. "And here," he said, raising a stack of papers, "are the bank statements, transfers from Madeline's event company to Victor's secondary account, broken into amounts under 10 grand. He tapped the top page. Avoiding detection. A flush crept up Madeline's neck. That was coordination fees. Logistics, it's called a kickback, Evan said quietly, but clearly, like flicking a drop of water onto open flame. Both technically and ethically. The murmurs turned into voices, suspicion morphed into outrage, outrage into demands for justice. "She made us laugh at the homeowner," said the gentleman with the cane, his voice low. "Made us mock her pain to cover up her own wrongdoing. And him," a woman in a silver dress pointed at Victor, "he made money off this house's back. Some crowds are good at clapping for whoever holds the mic, but others, when the light hits right, find the beat on their own." Tonight, the house witnessed the latter. Victor spun on his heel, trying to bolt. Jonas stepped in, blocking his path. "You are not going anywhere," he said calmly, like telling someone to stop slicing just as the knife hits the bone. "The police are on their way." "The police." Victor laughed, a sound brittle like dry wood. "Who called them?" "I did," Hale replied. "I wasn't here for the music. I came to settle accounts." Madeline looked around. No one stood with her anymore. The diamond necklace around her throat suddenly felt like a noose. Elena stepped closer. 3 steps away. Her voice was low, steady, not raised, but heard. "You have 2 choices. 1, apologize to everyone you insulted tonight, leave my home, and cooperate with legal counsel on restitution. Or 2, I let the police escort you out right now, and be ready to work with the attorney on restitution for the illegal gains. Or 2, I let the police escort you out right now." Madeline's eyes shimmered, not with diamonds, but with water. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time, her voice couldn't find its pitch. I'm sorry, for," she struggled, "the disrespect, for not knowing where I stood." She turned to Elena and bowed her head, not deep, but it was a bow. Elena nodded. "And you," she turned to Victor, "will return all keys, have your fingerprints wiped from the system, sign a termination agreement, and prepare to return all misused funds. Or we'll let the law speak for us." Victor let out a scoffing laugh. "The law? You think you can throw me in jail over some numbers on paper?" He grabbed a wine glass from the nearest table and hurled it to the ground. Crystal shattered. The crash rang out like an exclamation mark. Lily flinched. Elena instinctively wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders, pulling her behind. "What you've been shattering for years," Haley said, eyes locked on Victor, "isn't just glass. It's trust." He nodded at Jonas. "Keep him here." Jonas placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. Not forceful, but firm as a nail. Victor tried to shrug him off. Jonas held. A silent struggle between a man used to pulling strings and one who'd seen too much to flinch. Finally, Victor stood still. His breath reeked of wine and rage. The front door swung open. 2 police officers entered, their reflective jackets catching the light like cold blades. The guests instinctively parted, clearing a path. No one said a word. They didn't need to. The chill of night air rolled in, cutting through the heavy perfume of white flowers. "Good evening," the female officer said evenly. "Who is Elena Rosewood? I am." Elena stepped forward. "The homeowner." The word homeowner echoed through the mic, bounced off the stone floor, and snapped back like a rubber band. The room exhaled. Hale handed over the folder. These are the bank statements, contracts, and video files. We're reporting fraud, embezzlement, orchestrated defamation, and other security breaches. We'd like the individuals brought in for formal questioning. The male officer turned to Victor. Your name is Victor? Victor responded with silence and a yank of his arm. Jonas tightened his grip just slightly. Don't make this harder, he said. You've made it hard enough for everyone already. Madeline trembled. I'll cooperate. I have an attorney. She clasped her hands in front of her red nails, digging into her palms like fresh blood. I'm sorry. She looked at Elena once more. I withdraw. Elena looked straight into Madeline's still glittering eyes, glittering not with tears, but with pride, refusing to die. You won't step foot in my home again, she said slowly, not until you've learned how to walk into a kitchen without looking down on it. That lesson might take a while. Madeline exhaled sharply. She didn't answer. The officer stepped in. She walked. Her heels struck the floor like final punctuation marks. Victor didn't go as quietly. He turned abruptly, a sudden movement, and hurled another wine glass toward Elena and Lily. Marco sprang forward instinctively. His large hand caught the stem midair. Wine splashed out in a red arc, but stayed trapped in the glass, halted. Marco set it down. Kitchen, he shrugged, always puts out the fire on time. The male officer dropped all pretense of courtesy. The handcuffs clicked clean, crisp. Victor let out a dry, guttural laugh, but the sound hit the floor and shattered like crystal. The doors closed behind them. The ballroom suddenly felt bigger, lighter. People looked at each other. There were a few hugs, a few long sighs, a few flushed faces ashamed. Elena returned to the podium. The mic was still on. Below, Lily looked up at her, her small face aglow in the light eyes no longer wet. Tonight, Elena said this party ends a little differently. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at the family portrait on the wall. The smiles in the painting suddenly felt new. In her memory, she saw her late husband holding a swaddled Lily, smiling as he said, "Home is where you light the stove first." She had forgotten those words lost in the storms. Now they came back like embers, still glowing beneath the ashes. This house, she continued, starting tomorrow, will no longer be a ballroom for showing off. It will be a cooking school for underprivileged kids, for single mothers, like I once was, for anyone who needs a pair of hands that can warm a bowl. A murmur rippled through the room. Evan smiled, nodded, gave a quiet thumbs up. The old gentleman with the cane raised it as if saluting a new right. I'll keep the kitchen crew, the ones who truly worked, Elena said. Marco will be the head chef. Anyone who wants to stay will start fresh. Fair, transparent. Money will serve the meal before it serves the chandelier. Marco opened his mouth but couldn't speak. He placed a hand over his heart and bowed. Elena nodded back, eyes misty. She turned to the staff, young faces, old faces, some scared, some relieved. Anyone forced to do wrong tonight, if you come clean, you stay. No one loses their job for facing the truth. The young waiter, with brown hair and a mole on his cheek, stepped forward hesitantly. I'm sorry, he stammered. I took the money. I was scared. I needed the night shift to cover rent. Tears streamed down his face. I'll pay it back. I start over. Elena stepped down and walked up to the young waiter. You will start over, she repeated, beginning with telling the police everything you know. And tomorrow, show up at the kitchen at 8 a.m. You'll be chopping onions. A lot of onions, she smiled, until you're not afraid of tears anymore. A soft laugh rippled through the room, not mocking. It was the kind of laugh you only hear in kitchens, warm, smoky, scented with onions. Lily tugged at her mother's hand. What about the room behind the kitchen, Mom? She asked, serious-eyed. They said, we have to move out. Elena gently smoothed her daughter's hair. From now on, it's yours, ours, but not to sleep in, to read, to write. So tired, Moms, like I once was. Have a place to just sit and breathe. Lily nodded as if approving blueprints for something big. Hale stepped forward and laid another paper on the podium. Your husband's trust is still intact. I've preserved the interest. It's enough to launch the school. I'll handle the transfer of management. And he turned to the crowd. If you want to contribute, start with your time. Come teach a dish, tell a story, finish a bowl of soup without checking who's watching. A few hands went up. Evan said, I run a design firm. I'll donate a set of safe kitchen tools. The old man with the cane, I'll fund a scholarship in my wife's name. She made the best chicken soup in the world. The silver-dressed woman murmured, I'm sorry. And I'll bring baking books for the kids. These promises wove together not shiny but warm. A quilt, not a banner. Elena nodded. No effusive thanks, just one line. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., delivered with the clarity of a knife hitting cutting board. Outside, the wind shifted. The angel statue on the roof seemed to tilt its head slightly, listening. Rain sifted down like salt. The chandelier's crystals trembled not from wind, but because the house itself was breathing. One last thing. Elena walked to the family portrait, lifted the frame just a little, straightened it perfectly. From behind it, she pulled out a piece of paper yellowed with time. Her husband's handwriting from the day he laid the first brick. If one day you forget, remember home is where you're seen as human. She placed the paper on the podium beside the microphone. Tonight, the house remembered. She turned to the crowd. And we, those of us standing here, must remember too. A round of applause rose. Not explosive, thick like a warm blanket, and it went straight to the bone. The cleanup crew began collecting the wilted flower arrangements. A mellow, unobtrusive melody floated from the band. Small clusters of guests gathered around Elena, offering simple phrases. I'm sorry. Thank you. I was wrong. I'll come back. Gone were the arrogant speeches, the gilded words replaced by quiet sincerity. Madeline and Victor had been escorted out, but their echoes lingered like smoke after a fire, stifling and unforgettable. Elena knew tomorrow and the days ahead would bring fatigue, paperwork, quiet resistance. Yet she also knew she had been honest. And when you speak truth, shouting isn't needed. Lily tugged her mother's hand and led her into the garden. The rain was gentle now, grass damp beneath their feet, path lights glowing gold like embers. They stood before the angel's statue. Elena placed her bandaged hand on its stone wing. Cold ran through the dressing and then faded. Are you cold? She whispered. No, Lily replied, pressing her cheek against her mother's side. I'm warm. Elena smiled silently. The rain fell like flower dust drifting down, while spots of light danced on the grass. In that moment, life's noise slipped away, leaving only the pulse of a home awakening after a long sleep. She turned and walked back inside, passing the kitchen door. Marco was wiping down the cutting board as though tending to an old wound. The brown-haired waiter stood nearby, setting utensils with care, as if reorganizing a life. Jonas moved through the space, flipping off switches, until only a strip of nightlight remained for the last guest leaving to find their way safely. Tomorrow at 8, Elena reminded him. 7:30, Marco replied with the solemnity of a pledge. The head chef should always arrive early. Elena chuckled. Deal. Evan waited at the back door. I've got ideas for the little lounge, he said. Let's hang before and after photos of the kids' first meals, so they'll remember what fullness feels like. And no, they were seen, agreed Elena said, and let the kids teach the grown-ups how to sit at the table. Evan nodded and slipped away into the rainy night, his shadow long across the wet stones. Late night. But Elena didn't feel tired. She walked through the grand hall one last time, the lights dimmed, furniture in place. The mic on the podium was silent, and there lay her husband's note, soft as a lullaby. She bent to pick it up, folded it gently, and slipped it into her pocket, keeping the memory close to her heart. Lily tugged her hand up the stairs. I want to see the reading room, she said, the one behind the kitchen. Elena turned toward her with a soft smile, ready for the next chapter of home. 2 minutes, Elena said sternly, playing the part, then sleep. 2.5, Lily bargained. All right, Elena gave in with a smile. 2.5 and a half. They laughed softly, but the sound rang clear. The house heard it. Elena paused on the third step. the stone worn into a crescent shape beneath her toes. She bent down and placed a gentle kiss on it. A thank you to the secret door, a thank you to fingers that remembered their way. "House," she whispered, "we'll wake early tomorrow." Above her, the crystal pendants trembled like a nod. Downstairs, Jonas secured the final lock. Hale packed up his briefcase. The gentleman with the cane sat still for a while as if listening to music no one else could hear. He murmured perhaps to his late wife, "See, love, this house still knows how to teach people." Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of new earth of change. And somewhere in the noisy city, those who laughed cruelly tonight would have to fall asleep with a question unanswered. Who am I when the lights are gone? That question, if answered honestly, would be punishment enough. As for Elena, when she shut the reading room door, tucked the blanket around Lily and brushed the girl's hair back, she knew she would never again beg for a place. She stood here, fully. Not because the house belonged to her, but because she belonged to the house in the old sense of the word, a place where one is seen as human. Night closed. The climax had passed, but the flame didn't go out. It retreated into the kitchen, into the pot scrubbed clean, into the hands still warm, despite their burns, into the sleeping smile of a child at peace. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., the kitchen opens, the school opens, the house opens, and the doors inside the hearts of those who stood here begin to open too. The morning after. On the first morning after the chaos, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, spilling across the red carpet and flooding the family portrait on the wall. It no longer felt cold like yesterday when it only reflected diamonds and crystal glasses. Today, the light was warmer, softer, like a mother's arms wrapping around her child. Elena opened the large window, breathing in the scent of dew-drenched grass. The lace curtain fluttered in the gentle breeze. She stood there, her hands still bandaged, but her eyes brighter than ever. Not the brightness of someone who had won a battle, but of someone who had found herself again. Lily came running down the stairs barefoot, hair unbrushed, clutching an old sketchbook. "Mom, I drew our house again, but this time with a big table and lots of new people all eating together." Elena bent down to look at the messy but heartfelt drawing. In Lily's world, every chair was filled and no one was left standing. She'd colored the roof red, the windows yellow, and the steaming soup bowls green. She pulled her daughter into a hug, her heart full. Yes, this house wouldn't just be a place to live. It would be a place that opened its doors to those who, like her, once had nowhere else to go. 8:00 a.m. Footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. Marco had arrived early, dressed in a crisp white chef's coat, a world away from the fatigue of the night before. He held a knife in one hand, cutting board ready, and wore his gentle smile. "What's first, boss?" he asked, half teasing. "The simplest thing," Elena replied. "Vegetable soup. The one that kept me and my daughter going through the hardest times." The rest of the staff trickled in, including the young waiter with the mole on his cheek, the one who had been coerced the night before. They looked at Elena differently now, no more hesitation, no more judgment. There was respect in their eyes, but more importantly, trust. The young man gave a deep bow. "I'll start with the onions just like you said." Elena smiled and handed him a big bag. "Cut each one, and don't fear the tears. We're going to turn them into flavor." The kitchen came alive. Knives clinked, pots bubbled. Steam and wrapped the air in a comforting scent. Gone were the cold commands and the fear of making mistakes. What remained was the quiet excitement of people cooking for something far bigger than themselves. The mansion doors swung open. A group of women entered with small children. They wore worn coats, dark circles under tired eyes, holding the hands of skinny kids. Some were single mothers, some were migrant workers. All of them looked lost. Elena stepped forward, not from a stage, not through a microphone, just with a soft embrace and a simple greeting, "Welcome home." The children's eyes lit up when they saw the long table covered in a clean white cloth, not set with wine or gleaming silverware, but with humble porcelain bowls, stainless steel spoons, and steaming soup that smelled like comfort. Lily ran out and began pulling out chairs. "Please have a seat, ma'am." Sir, over here. Her clear little voice made the adults pause. They weren't used to being invited to sit in a place like this. But Elena's eyes were firm. This was their place now. No one would be left behind. Marco brought out the big pot of soup, ladling it into bowls and handing each one over with care. The clinking of spoons, the delighted squeals of children getting their first hot meal echoed through the room. A new kind of feast had begun. No crystal lights, no evening gowns, but warmer and more real than anything that had come before. Words spread faster than gossip. The media showed up, but Elena declined all paid interviews. She only said one thing: if you want to write something, write about these mothers and their children. You don't need to write about me. Day by day, the house filled up. Poor students came to learn how to cook affordable, nutritious meals. Single mothers gathered, cooking, sharing stories, crying and laughing. Some learned to bake bread for the first time. Others figured out how to chop vegetables without cutting their fingers. The walls that once displayed only expensive art were now covered with children's drawings. The windows that used to flaunt lace curtains now swung wide open to let the breeze in. And the kitchen, once reserved for exclusive parties, now rang with laughter, with cheers, with the rhythmic clatter of knives and cutting boards like a heartbeat. The house had come alive. No longer a mansion in the showy sense, but a true home in the human sense. One afternoon, as Elena wiped down a table, the front door opened. A tall woman with graying hair stepped in. Her presence still carried the ghost of pride. It was Madeline. No one laughed. No one turned her away. Everyone simply watched in silence. Madeline walked up and placed a bag of flour and a few bottles of milk on the table. Her voice was rough. "I'm not good at apologizing, but if it's all right, I'd like to learn how to bake." Elena studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Start with onions. Everyone here starts with onions." Madeline froze, then chuckled, a tired but genuine sound. For the first time, there was no sarcasm in it. She rolled up her sleeves, picked up a knife, and sat beside the young waiter with the mole on his cheek. No one said a word. But in that silence, another door quietly opened, a door called a second chance. That night, after everyone had gone, Elena stood alone in the grand hall. The soft, yellow light cast her shadow across the tiled floor. A small hand reached out and touched hers, Lily. "Mom," she said, "I'm proud of you." Elena dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter close. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Not tears of shame, but of joy, of release, of a long journey finally finding its end. "You're the reason I've made it this far," Elena whispered, her voice wavering with emotion. "If it weren't for you, I would have fallen long ago." Lily shook her head. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here to see tomorrow." In that moment, mother and daughter held each other, and the house seemed to hold them too, with its light, its warmth, with memories transformed into strength. The grand opening of Rosewood Culinary School. Elena stood at the head of a long table full of eager children and weary mothers. She didn't read a speech or recite prepared remarks. Instead, she told a story. There was once a woman who was mocked in a grand hall when she dropped a wine glass. But that glass is what reminded her that no one has the right to define your worth except you. And tonight, if you've ever been underestimated, ever made to feel unwelcome, remember you have a place here. A house is truly warm only when it opens its doors to those who've known the coldest. Silence settled heavy and profound, and then a surge of applause filled the room. Late night quiet reflection. Long after everyone had fallen asleep, Elena quietly returned to the kitchen. The soup pot was clean, dishes stacked neatly. She lit a single candle, placed it gently on the wooden table, and closed her eyes. In the silence, echoes drifted back, clinking utensils, crying laughter, taunts, but all now passed. In the present, only the soft hush of wind through the door, her daughter's breathing steady in sleep, and the tiny flame dancing on its wick, a living symbol of a fire that will never go out. Night settled over the Rosewood estate. The lights no longer blazed to impress. Only a single oil lamp glowed softly at the end of the hallway, casting a gentle circle of gold. Elena stood there, leaning against the doorway, watching her daughter sleep in peace. Her mind replayed everything that had happened in such a short but relentless span of time: the mocking laughter, the shattering of a wine glass, the stinging insults, and then that fateful turn that silenced the entire hall. It was like watching a film in slow motion, a film in which she, once just a single mother on the verge of breaking, had become the central character. And she knew her story wasn't over. Because beyond every closed door out there were still so many like her: abandoned women, overlooked children, people who had been labeled invisible. On the official opening day of the Rosewood Community Kitchen, a light rain fell. Yet, instead of gloom, the sky seemed strangely bright, the rainfall washing years of dust off the old walls. People arrived not out of curiosity, but because they believed that here at last they might find what they had long been missing: recognition. Elena stood in the middle of the crowded room, holding an onion in her hand. She lifted her gaze and smiled. This is what everyone fears. It makes us cry. But you know what? Cutting onions isn't shameful. It's a beginning. Here, everyone starts with onions. Because tears don't make you weak, tears make you human. The room fell silent. Then the sound of knives filled the air. Chop, chop, chop. Steady, rhythmic. And though tears streamed down cheeks, this time no one bowed their heads in shame. Elena's story spread quickly, not through tabloids or flashy headlines, but through the very people who had sat at that long table. A little boy brought a container of soup to school, proudly telling his friends, "My mom learned to cook at Rosewood." An elderly woman whispered to her neighbor that for the first time in her life she had eaten at a crowded table without anyone looking down on her worn clothes. And soon others began to ask, if one house can change lives, why not an entire neighborhood? Why not an entire city? The doors of Rosewood swung wide and seeds of hope began to take root everywhere. That was when a voice rose, not just Elena's anymore, but as if speaking straight to the viewers watching on the other side of the screen. Have you ever been dismissed because of where you came from? Have you ever been mocked for a small mistake while your real pain went unseen? Have you ever wished you could rise up just once and prove to the world that you were never ordinary? Elena's story isn't just hers. It could be yours too. Because every one of us, at least once in our lives, has carried the weight of being overlooked. And it is in that very moment when you feel like breaking that you can turn it into strength. And no one else, only you can do that. Images flashed across the screen: jobless men now standing in kitchens, learning to cook for their families. Young women once shunned by peers, now smiling as they carried trays of fresh bread. Children racing around the long dining table, their laughter louder than the rain outside. This wasn't just a house. It was proof that if one person dares to stand up, an entire community can change. And the audience, you could be that person. Rise up, speak out, act. Don't let anyone else decide your worth. Don't let scornful eyes define your life. Don't wait for a miracle, you are the miracle. And then softer, warmer. Maybe you don't have a mansion. Maybe all you have is a tiny kitchen, an old wooden table, a pot with the enamel chipped away. But remember this: the biggest fire begins with a single matchstick. And the happiness of a community begins with one meal shared from the heart. The screen fades darker until only the glow of small candles remains arranged in a circle on a long table. Children sit around them. Adults too. Each person holds a steaming bowl of soup in their hands. At the center sit Elena and Lily. Elena looks around, her eyes no longer those of someone once mocked, but of someone who has finally found her reason to live. She speaks softly, but the whole room hears: a home isn't built from walls. A home lives in hearts that beat together. The voice turns outward now to the viewers themselves. If you're watching this and you've ever felt dismissed, leave a comment. Write down one thing you want to rise up and prove to the world. Because who knows, your story might be the reason someone else finds the strength to keep going. If you believe kindness can change one life, and one life can change a community, share this video. You may never know, but that one share could be the spark that restores someone's faith. And if you want to walk with us on the journey of stories like this, subscribe. Because this isn't the end, it's only the beginning. Never underestimate the power of a heart that has been broken, that has loved, and that still rises in the end. Because it's those hearts, the scarred, the brave, that can change the world. The screen goes black, and one final line appears in simple white letters. Any house can hold a miracle if you're willing to open the door.